am Sarah Tolson. I'm one of the co-founders of the Mindful Applicant. And my co-founder, Ashley Lynn, is actually at a retreat in California, and the internet sort of went down today. So we are expecting that she might be able to pop in and have you all meet her. But in the event that she can't, I'm very pleased to be here kind of sharing all of this with you. So as I said, I'm Sarah, and I'm from the Mindful Applicant, and we are an education technology company based in Boston. And we're on a mission to bring more humanness to high schools and to college and career preparation. And what I mean by that more specifically is that we are building a purpose portfolio. And ultimately, that purpose portfolio will live next to your high school transcript. And it will be a way for you to sort of learn social and emotional skills, and also to track that whole sort of side of your growth. If the transcript captures your academic side, the portfolio captures your non-academic side, which I think we can agree is a pretty expansive and important part of you. So we like to ask questions like, how do I make a good decision? How do I build allies? How do I find mentors? How do I know myself? How do I cut through the bullshit? And we believe those things can be learned. And in fact, there's not enough of that happening in schools. So that's just a little bit about us. But without further ado, let's sort of get on to the heart of things. Before I jump in, just a shout out to Fiveable. They are an amazing company. If you're not already following them on all of the socials, go ahead and do that. I know you won't regret it. I know I don't. So we're here to talk about self-care tonight. And really, like, what does that mean? What is self-care? Well, the definition is technically a conscious act that one takes to promote physical, mental, and emotional health. So oftentimes we think about drinking water, getting outside, getting enough sleep, and meditating. And all of these things are great. And I mean, they are really great. I am trying to do all of these enough in my life. But the funny part about thinking about self-care in this way is that it really reduces everything to the physical, and in fact actually makes it reactive. So you are often trying to get enough sleep because you feel tired. You're already in this depleted place, or you're getting outside because you've been, cramped up. So we sort of come to self-care when we're already in this place of needing it. And we're here tonight to kind of think of how in the college process are you a little more proactive and thinking about kind of a true holistic way to care for yourself. So how do you do that? Well, let's start with this kind of simple dynamic. There is this unfortunate plot twist, which is that even if you do drink tons of water and you get outside and you're sleeping 8 hours every night, the challenges and frustrations of the college process are still going to exist. We can't get rid of them. So what if instead we really embrace them as an opportunity? So what if self-care in the college process is fundamentally a chance to change your perception? To go from a place of default, of dependence, doing what other people tell you to, needing to be cared for, kind of following the rules, to one of intention, where you are in a place of independence and you're making your own decisions that feel right for you and good for you, and creating situations and rituals where you care for yourself. So here's the takeaway, is that self-care is more than what we think it is. It's more than drinking water and exercising. It's really related to moving through the college process with intention, or at least that's what I'm here tonight to try to convince you to believe. So what are these defaults? What do I mean when I talk about a default and default mode? Defaults they differ depending on where you grew up, how you were raised, your circumstances. On the extremes, you have students that are told you have to go to an Ivy League school. That is the only narrative they know, hence that becomes the default. On the other extreme, you have students that are told they shouldn't bother going to college. They aren't good enough, it's not for them. And both of these are default narratives. And both of them are inherently untrue. There's so many more options, so many more ways to skin the cat than just those two things. And that's true of sort of every narrative in between. So defaults are the stories that our systems and structures have told us. And they aren't always bad, I should make that clear. They aren't always wrong. And you may not even want to leave them, but you do need to examine them. So if you examine them, we believe then that the college process can actually become a really beautiful rite of passage. So the college process itself is just composed of like a complex set of transactions. You've got to get your recommendations. You have to take AP tests or SAT tests, some kind of standardized test. You've got to write your essays, of course. You have to interview, visit schools. But if you think about it deeply, if all that transactional stuff is happening on the surface, then underneath, you have this opportunity for a coming of age. So a coming of age, that's existed, like this idea of coming of age, it's existed in cultures across time. And it really is sort of a marking of someone's transition from adolescence to adulthood. And so you can think of things like a Sweet 16 party or religious rites of passage like confirmations or bar and bat mitzvahs. So I propose to you tonight that the college process is no different. There's an opportunity for you to undergo the same kind of personal self-discovery journey. So, interesting fact here, the human brain has two periods of really rapid growth, when we're infants and then again when we are adolescents. So if you stop and think about it, you are designed for this rite of passage, for this personal discovery. You don't have to do anything special. You have everything you need already. So we're all pretty well versed in the stereotype of the rebellious teenager, and no stereotype is universally true. But there is something real here. And that is that the adolescent brain is hardwired to take risks, to question, to explore. And we say, don't resist this energy. Instead, channel it into your college process. Lean into that energy. So choosing to shift your mindset and view this process as more than something to get through, that is ultimately the greatest act of self-care. So just to double down on the science part of things, we also wanted to point out Keegan's 5 stages of adult development, which is a framework for how people organize their experiences as they grow. And so you are sort of increasing in complexity and intentionality. So in stage 3 on the left, this is where we are in the socialized mind. And this is really like, you can think of this as the default mode. You follow the rules, you play the game that exists. We're defined by our existing relationships. So maybe that's family or certain institutions. And then when you move up in stages and you get to stage 5, all the way on the right, you're able to see, oh, back at stage 3, like I was looking at the world through a perspective that my parents or society gave me. And now I hold multiple identities, and I can take on different perspectives and sort of embrace all of the paradoxes therein. So interesting just to note, though, that only 1% of the population ever achieves stage 5. So we aren't suggesting this to you as like, oh, why don't you pass through all of these stages through your college process? No, that's not our intent here. It's really more to say this is an invitation. A challenge for your personal development. Can you move up in these stages? Do you feel stuck in stage 3? And like the college admissions, again, is like something that you're trying to just get through because it's kind of a requirement or a rule. Okay, so let's just sort of briefly recap. So far we've covered that the greatest act of self-care is not to drink water and meditate your way through the college process, but rather to lean into this moment in your life as a rite of passage. And in fact, you're perfectly designed to do this. Your brain is totally ready for it. So we've also established what the default is, these narratives that you've been told by your system. And so the alternative to default, the way of moving through your rite of passage and exiting default, is to act with intention. So what is intention? The root of intention is actually stretching towards purpose. And I don't think that could be more perfect. So to live with intention is to follow the things that give you purpose and meaning and bring joy, rather than the things that you've been told or even are telling yourself that you should or must do. So let me just make this connection to self-care, because I really want to sort of beat the proverbial dead horse there. So I want you to just consider for a moment a plant. A plant that is alive is always growing. There's no such thing as like a plant that just has, quote, grown up. Plants don't pause, they always stretch. And the truth is that humans do that too. And so we can either be sort of stretching in intentional ways towards things that we aspire to, or we're stretching in unintentional ways, default ways, towards things that we don't aspire to, or we've been told we should aspire to. So when you stretch towards your purpose, you really flourish. And flourishing is isn't that really ultimately the culmination of good self-care, of really true proactive rather than reactive self-care? Okay, so if you're feeling a little bit like, well, this is all wonderful and great, like I would love to just like live in this world of meaning and purpose and joy and only do the things that bring me joy. But like earth to you, Sarah, that's not the reality. I'm with you, and I welcome your skepticism. And that's okay. So I think a great example of this that exists often in the college process is that your mom wants you to apply for scholarships, and getting scholarships, that's your default narrative. You have to get scholarships. And that is probably your default narrative because you have some financial need to go on this very expensive higher education journey. But applying for scholarships, like, show me someone who's like, man, that brings me so much joy. I don't know if that person really exists. So this is all to say, and what I want to really capture here is there is nuance and struggle in exiting the default. And really the obvious thing too is that our lives and the college admissions system support the default. Like they wouldn't be the default otherwise. So the goal here isn't necessarily to totally exit the default all the time or reject it or turn away from it. The goal is really more to be creative within it and actually to sort of pause and recognize what it is for you. So being able to discern when you can be creative and when you need to be realistic. So we have two examples to sort of share and add color to kind of the potential or how these nuances might look. And so the first is Ashley, my co-founders, that I'll share with you, and then I'll share my own. So Ashley Ashley just graduated from high school. So if you guys are juniors and seniors, she's just ahead of you in this journey. And she's decided to take a gap year before she ultimately attends Penn next fall. But her default within her community and her family, taking a gap year was initially out of the question. That was not the default narrative. The default was that she should go directly to college, that her parents have helped to provide this opportunity and she should take advantage of it straight away. But for Ashley, she is a sort of non-traditional student and really went through high school pretty differently, taking classes at different schools and doing a lot of stuff outside of the classroom. And for her, her intention was really to continue with that non-traditional mode of learning. And so the gap year ultimately is a compromise. It's a way of being creative within the default so that she can live according to her intention to be non-traditional. So in my case, I want to point out first that for me, my defaults were deeply internalized. I had very supportive parents who said, go anywhere to school. Prestige doesn't matter. You don't have to go to a top school. We want you to be happy. They are remarkable in their support of me. But I had very deeply internalized the need to go to a top school just because of my education community, because that's what the people around me were striving to do. And so I had recognized that that was a way to like really gain social capital, and to have success. So what I share this because I want you to not just think about your default as all of these things kind of happening on you or around you. They may not exist externally. In order to find them and examine them, you might very well need to be looking inside of yourself. So the other part of my story is that like it worked out for me. I was fortunate to go to a very good school where I received a very good education, which has certainly opened doors for me and stretched my mind in the ways that one hopes college will. And so in this case, it's to say that the default worked. It served me well. However, I didn't examine it. And so to this day, I don't think I got out of my college experience what I could have. I wasn't able to take advantage of the wonderful experience in the way that I would have liked to, because I just continued to live in my default and continued to sort of try to please my teachers, to get the best grades I could. I wasn't thinking truly about what I wanted. So let's dig into some more examples. If we're going to go through the college process with intention, how do we kind of create that rite of passage for ourselves? Well, big transformative events are composed of many little ones. So rites of passage always have rituals, things that you do with intention, attention, and repetition. And rituals are powerful because they allow you to put intentions into practice. You have the opportunity to create a new story for who you are, and you have this specific kind of time-bound way of doing it. So here is an example. And this again is from Ashley's story. So last fall, as she was applying to college, Ashley was really in this default mind, which I'm sure many of you are starting to experience, which was that the college process is fast moving and it's stressful and it's going to overtake your life at 110%. So every moment needs to be optimized for college prep. If you're not working on something for college, like you're just wasting your time. But that wasn't really making her happy. And so the intentionality that she wanted to bring was to slow down, to take breaks, and to build in time for rest. So that's something that she wanted. So how did she execute that? What kind of ritual? There's this wonderful book called The Power of Ritual, and it suggested a tech Sabbath. And a tech Sabbath is this bold endeavor to take 24 hours away from your computer, your phone, and the internet. And instead spend time with people that you love, get outside, play the piano, bake something, do activities that are really nourishing to you. So that is one interesting option. Ashley took her intention to slow down to rest through the college process by observing a tech Sabbath. Now, maybe you're thinking like, holy cow, 24 hours away from your computer when you're trying to apply for college? Like, that's just absurd. So maybe it's 3 hours or 2 hours or 1 hour. Or maybe you create a gratitude journal and every Friday night you just put down some like 3 things you're grateful for. Just some ideas. So let's keep going down this path of how do we create these rituals? Other than a tech Sabbath, what are ways to bring rituals to the college process? So first, just remember that anything with intention, attention, and repetition can be ritualized. So intention, that's like bringing consciousness to what you're doing. Attention means that when your focus starts to drift, you come back to it. And repetition means that this should be habitual. You don't just do this one time and then leave it. But think of this: the way you brush your teeth, the way you take notes in class, the way you share meals or celebrate, the way you grieve, the way you experience confusion and stress and loss. You can insert ritual into all of those places. So here are some, again, just to keep building on, like, what are some to think about for the college process? And we offer these to you as take these and riff off of them, build off of them, make them your own. Because remember that in order for a ritual to be good and to actually be a ritual, you have to have an intent behind it. So here's a potential ritual. Every time you go on a college visit, after you do your tour, go to McDonald's, get a Big Mac, and then sit in the car or sit outside or sit in the restaurant if you can, safely, social distancing, and have that Big Mac and chat over the experience with your parent or your guardian or whomever you're traveling with. Another thought, just like linger in your favorite teacher's classroom or stop by every Monday, fourth period, to just chat casually with your teachers. I think often in the college process, students end up asking for recommendations, but really not having a lot of other conversations with their teachers. So this could be a way to really sort of put some intention into how you build a relationship. Agree with a friend that every time you're feeling stressed out, you're going to send a smiley face emoji or some other emoji that you like, so that your text chain becomes this like series of the emoji that you like. Why not? Another idea, keep a journal, use it to brainstorm your essay ideas. As I said, take a page from Ashley's book, and if it's not a tech Sabbath, maybe you just keep your phone in a drawer for a couple of hours. And just remember that rituals are to uphold an intention. So think about the intention you want to follow and build your ritual around it. So we've talked about moving from default to intention in college admissions. And there's something important that we need to acknowledge here, that personally, I hate it when people say, don't worry about college. It doesn't matter. Like you matter more than the college. And yes, that's true. And I do believe that. But I also know that college matters a great deal. And your rite of passage matters a great deal. So we have to sort of hold both as true, that we can't overrule all of the other things that are important in order to make college important. So during college, the college admissions process, and when you're thinking really about those transactional things, all of that surface level to-do work that you have to complete, you're really thinking about things that benefit future me. So that's in the bottom right of the bento box. And you may think, oh my God, I'm making the biggest decision of my life, like my future prospects hang on this. And it's true that having a good post-high school plan is important. But we can't be sort of sacrificing everything for the future me. The now me needs attention too, and needs intentional rituals that are going to keep the now me. Maybe these are the self-care things we talked about: water, exercise, meditation, to keep yourself feeling good in the now. And then the now us. What is that? That's about your relationships in the moment. So are you sacrificing all of your relationships in this moment for that future me? Are you using your counselors and your friends, like seeing them as pieces on your chessboard to help you get to college, rather than real humans with whom you have a connection? And then finally, consider your role in the future us, the top right corner. How does this process contribute to the world? You have an opportunity to use your experience to redefine what college admissions means for so many cohorts of high school students to come. And how are you modeling a rite of passage? So there's different dimensions of your well-being in any moment. And if you're bringing intentionality into your process, you can be thinking through how to take care of each of these dimensions of yourself. So our goal for you is to create awareness of your defaults. Once your brain has awareness, you have choice. And so when you have choice, you can now either separate from the default if you want to, or if it's serving you, you can keep it, or you can keep some parts of it and get rid of others. As we said, it's very nuanced. So the key here is to examine through reflection and bring awareness. So first, you identify your default. Reflect on what works and doesn't. Once you've identified what's not working for you, that's where you build in your intention through a ritual. And then you do those rituals consistently. And this is going to help you to move from living in a lot of I should, to more I want. So let's look at an example. And maybe this is true for some of you that are listening and watching. Let's just say that my default is that I have to go to an in-state school. That's my default mode. And maybe that's for good reason. Maybe that's because the in-state school is going to be a less expensive tuition. And you realize that when you're thinking about that, it feels really limiting to you. Thinking about and dreaming about attending an in-state school feels limiting. So note here that your issue is not the in-state school itself. Your issue is this feeling of limitation. So you need to create rituals that allow you to feel limitless. And I can think just off the top of my head of a number of things that I could do that would make me personally feel more limitless. I could listen to music really loudly on my headphones and have a dance party. I could go on a long drive, probably also playing loud music. I could run like really, really, really fast. Maybe I could sit in the woods by myself. I could journal about my dreams. I could go online and look up dream houses. I could Google and look up dream trips that I want to take. I could create a vision board and just continue to add to that each week. So any of those could be rituals that I enacted every day or every week to help me feel more limitless. And then if we think about the college process on the whole, what are ways that you could make an in-state school feel more limitless if it's feeling like it is limiting you? You could study abroad. You could live off campus. You could get an internship out of state. You could take some really weird or challenging courses outside of your major or get involved in some really weird clubs. Or perhaps you just sort of commit to going to college in state, and then you plan for and save up for going to college out of state when the time comes. Or I'm sorry, not going to college out of state, but after you graduate from college, maybe you can find a job out of state. So notice here that I've offered you sort of both day-to-day rituals that would allow you to meet your intention of feeling limitless in your kind of day-to-day life, as well as examining your kind of higher default narrative and looking for kind of creative ways to bring more limitlessness into your default within reason and within the realities of needing to go to an in-state school because it's a more cost-effective option. So to kind of bring things home here, I know that's been a lot of information. I don't think we would be doing our job well if we hadn't hit you with a ton of stuff. But ultimately, everything I've said tonight boils down to something really simple. And that is, I want you to consider these pictures and consider just how annoying it is to be stuck in traffic. And when you're stuck in traffic, what's going through your mind? This is frustrating. These people are so annoying. This is so annoying. Oh my God, this sucks. I can't believe this is happening. Why is this happening? And here's the catch. None of us is stuck in traffic. We actually are the traffic. We are actively a part of the system And as such, we have power to change it. So the same thing can be said of our college admissions journey. You are not stuck in the college application process. You are the college application process. And therefore, you have power to turn it into something you want it to be. So it's really important to see yourself as an individual agent of change. Instead of this acting upon you, you can act within it. Someone once told me, if you aren't at the table, you're on the table. But lucky you are at the table in this college process. And so when you act with intention, you put yourself at the table and you gain agency. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. For all of you high school seniors out there, if you're feeling stressed out and like there's no hope and like things are crazy, just know that you're not alone. We totally get you. We've been there, and just know and trust that things will get better. If you're interested in using the college process as a rite of passage, please check us out on Instagram or at themindfulapplicant.com. We're running an essay writing program this fall called Brain Alive that uses these topics to help you practice self-care while writing your Common App essay. And we really do believe that the college process is a chance for you to find your U-shaped hole in the world. And we hope that you can embrace this opportunity to do so. So with that, I'm turning it over to all of you for questions. And so you have this QR code here on the screen. And then I know that Fiveable also shared with you a link to the Mentimeter in the link to the video. And I will go ahead and go over there now to see what questions you guys are throwing up there. Okay, so we're getting one here. Any tips on how to manage being overwhelmed? Oh my word, great question. I can tell you what works for me, and then I offer that to you, and then you can sort of adopt it as you will. I think first off, just know that that's perfectly normal. You're not alone in that feeling. And in fact, I would wonder about your humanness if you weren't overwhelmed by the college process. Because if at the end of the day, if it is a rite of passage underneath it all, then isn't that worth being overwhelmed for? But you're asking for tips on how to manage being overwhelmed. Well, there's the standard things that are very hard for some of us to do. I'm a world-class procrastinator, but working ahead and taking the process in sort of bite-sized chunks, that's really great. If you're attending this now and you're a rising senior, then I'm really encouraged by that because you're kind of ahead of the game. And then I also think, so I'm a co-founder of the Mindful Applicant. If it wasn't obvious, I'm pretty into mindfulness. And so you can try out some mindfulness practices. So some that are really simple that I like. And the reason I like mindfulness is that you don't have to go out of your way to do it. You can practice mindfulness right in your day-to-day. So first off, when you start to feel overwhelmed, consider that really, like if you're noticing that you're overwhelmed, really pause to notice it and allow yourself to feel it. Ask yourself the question, when I feel overwhelmed, like where does it express myself in my body? Is it lower back pain? Is it a headache? Is it just like a heightened nervousness all over? But notice how it's manifesting physically. And then if you take a few deep breaths, when you breathe out, I want you to actually send it to wherever those parts of you are. So let's say when I feel overwhelmed, it's kind of like a headache and I get anxious. So if I take deep breaths and I sort of send that breath to my mind, that's a way of being mindful. I hope that was helpful. What if your essay, here's the next question. What if your essay is what is making you overwhelmed about the application? Okay, so first I would just say to you, that's a really interesting and bold choice. To write your essay about the process of applying is sort of like that's a little bit meta. And so I'm interested in that. Like, let me just say, sort of kudos on that, has the potential, I think, to be an interesting, kind of complicated essay topic that could potentially help you sort of stand out in the crowd. But let me just read this again. What if your essay is what is making you overwhelmed about the application? Oh, I'm sorry, I totally read that wrong the first time. So you're saying, oh my God, my essay is super duper stressing me out and making me feel overwhelmed. There it is. God, I really got it wrong the first time. Okay, so ignore previous advice. Yeah, totally. The essay is a very overwhelming part of the application. And my thought process on why this is your grades in many ways are kind of already set by the time you're at this stage in the process. You've got to collect those recommendations. There's tests to be taken, but the essay is just, it's such a amorphous thing to wrangle. So how do you manage that? Again, I go to if you can sort of fight the evils of procrastination, which I know is really hard, like I'm not good at it. But taking your essay, giving yourself a lot of time to write your essay is definitely helpful, because it's just going to get better the more times you work through it. I also recommend, I really like to write in notebooks. I've got one sitting right here where I take like heaps of notes and I write things to myself. And the benefit of using a notebook is that we write more slowly than we type. And so sometimes at the start of essay drafting, the speed of writing can actually better match the speed of your thoughts. And so it's just sort of a different experience in terms of getting your ideas out. What else can I offer you in terms of how to tackle the essay? I mean, selfishly, we have a program called Brain Alive. I'd love for you to check it out. I certainly think joining our course would help you, but that is just me wanting to work with you. But in that respect, also bringing trusted community members in. I don't know who that is for you, but if you can talk with a peer about your essay, or a teacher, a counselor, a parent, I think oftentimes that conversation can be illuminating. You can also ask that person to specifically ask them, hey, I want to tell you about what I'm writing my essay on, and I want you to reflect back to me what you hear. I think that can be a really good tactic for kind of understanding how you're coming across to a potential college admissions officer. So let me just recap that, because I've been like all over the show with my answer. But consider writing on paper, because it adapts your brain a little bit differently. The speed of writing and typing are not the same. And sometimes writing being a little slower can kind of help your thoughts emerge. Definitely talk it out with peers or counselors or teachers or parents. And specifically ask them the question, say, I want to sort of tell you my story, and I want you to reflect back to me what you're hearing. And that way you can gain a better understanding of how you're kind of coming across, and if you are actually coming across in the way that you want. Other just sort of helpful tricks. Before writing the essay, sometimes I like to ask, like, what do you want the admissions officer to walk away knowing about you? And kind of list out on a Post-it note the 3 things you want the admissions officer to know about you. And then you can always go back and check and see, oh, is the story I'm telling actually capturing this sort of person that I want them to meet? Another kind of great, I think it's really fun, but a fun essay writing like exercise is to write like 5 or 10 first sentences. Just like write down. So when people talk about, let me rewind. Why first sentences, Sarah? Oh, great question. Well, you want to hook the reader into your essay from the start. I'm sure you've heard that before. It's like the oldest kind of piece of advice in the book. but you really want to capture their attention and draw them into your essay from the first line. So if that's what you need to do in this genre of writing, then write like 5 or 10 first sentences and then see where those take you, and sort of treat it as this, those books, those like Choose Your Adventure, where you would pick the different chapter. Maybe I'm really painting myself as a millennial, because that was like pretty cool when I was a kid. But then kind of see where the story goes depending on those opening lines, and just like play around with different opening lines. So that's another kind of, that can sometimes help people like get off the starting line and get momentum. And usually having momentum helps you feel less overwhelmed. I'm going to go to the next question, because I'm going on about that one. Here's the question. I feel like I need to sit down and do everything at once for my applications. Any tips? Amen to you. Okay, let me walk you through what I'm kind of hearing. If that is the default that you're experiencing, you feel like you need to sit down and get everything done, then your default is like you need to act with speed and urgency, and you're feeling a lot of stress, all of which is very normal. But how do let's say we're trying to sort of intentionally hold room for the opposite to be true. So you want to sort of go slowly, or feel more peace, feel more ease. What is a ritual that you could kind of create to help yourself do that? Well, I think Ashley kind of is a good model with her tech Sabbath, that the more you can kind of find rest and peace by doing nourishing things and getting off your technology, that may sort of help you feel better. I think also, and sort of the tip here is, again, it's like that annoying piece of advice of, if you can take this process in sort of smaller chunks and get things done over time, that might help you that certainly helps you to just kind of manage the volume of work that you have to get done. But really, like, what I'm hearing from that question is that you are feeling a lot of urgency, and just ask yourself, like, is that urgency true? And since it's August, like, there is urgency in this process, but you don't have to submit your college essays tomorrow. You have time. And so if you start working on them now, you can kind of take it at a pace. And when I tell you don't have urgency now, that's not an invitation to like slack off and wait until December to do anything. But just really, that's an invitation to examine like that default thought that you're holding, and just ask yourself, like, is that true? Like, do I really have to do everything today? And I'm here to say that no, you don't have to do everything today. So just kind of question that default that you've internalized. Okay, man, we're getting great questions tonight. What if you don't have an interesting story for your application and are struggling to find it? These are really great questions. Okay, first off, you have an interesting story. You are a human being that has been on this earth for like 16, 17, 18, 19, 15, some number of years. Everybody's kind of comes to this process at a different age, so I list a lot of them. You do have an interesting story to tell. Your college essay doesn't have to be some massive, like, I have struggled greatly and I've gone through this crazy thing, and here's my huge hero's journey, and here's the amazing company I've started. And I think there is a default narrative out there that says that the college essay has to be some kind of like massive arrangement of like the extraordinary events that have happened in your life. And like for many teenagers, you're on the cusp of extraordinary things happening. So first off, there is something interesting for you to say about yourself, because you are a human being, and you have lived on this earth. And then at the same time, I'm sort of holding the contradiction as true too, which is like you are moving into adulthood. And so this expectation that somehow like all this like crazy stuff has happened in your life, how can how can that also be a reality? Okay, so here's the key. The key to a good college essay is figuring out where you are truly distinct. And I like to say that we are all 99% the same. Every single person on this planet is 99% the same. We're all humans. And then we're 1% different. So think about that. Think about your peer group, your friends, your family, and ask yourself, how am I 1% different than my family? How am I 1% different than my peers? How am I 1% different than my closest friends? And I think asking the questions in that way starts to get you to a place where you're identifying like that U shape. Like, what's your U-shaped hole in the world? If you're sort of looking at what makes you 1% different, you're finding that edge. So ask those questions. What makes you 1% different than my peers, my friends, my family? And I think you might find an interesting story there. And mind you that it can be something tiny. Like, I think you can write an essay out of, like, in my peer group, I'm the only one that doesn't use organic soap. Like, investigate that. What's behind that? Why don't you use organic soap when everybody else does? I think what I'm trying to say with that is just don't underestimate the small stuff. It could be really powerful. And then another kind of interesting question to ask is, I also think about, it's just another way of like thinking, so maybe this one sits better for you, but where do you feel that, like, if all the salmon are swimming downstream, where do you feel that you swim upstream? And I sort of mean by that, like, I think it takes superpowers to swim upstream. So where are you doing, where are your sort of superpowers lying? And maybe you can investigate that. I hope that was helpful. Next question. Hi. Do you have any books, podcasts you'd recommend to learn more on ritual building and mindfulness? Ooh, that's a lovely question. Well, I would recommend this book that was in our, I'm going back in the slide deck. I hope you can see this, The Power of Ritual. That's really an excellent and interesting one, and really sort of inspired the tech Sabbath. And then in terms of mindfulness, there's a man by the name of Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he is, I think he's a really interesting mindfulness thinker, and I appreciate a lot of his work. And actually, like, he was sort of the first person I learned about that got me started down the journey of mindful thinking. So those are the two kind of key pillars on ritual and mindfulness that I often turn to. So that's The Power of Ritual that you see on the screen, and then Jonathan Kabat-Zinn, and it's Kabat. That's how you spell Kabat, Kabat. Awesome question. Love it. Next question. I really appreciate your tips. Thank you. That's really kind of you to say. I'm someone who really struggles with stress and feeling overwhelmed, so I really needed this. Oh, gosh, you're welcome. Thank you for saying that. Really awesome of you to share gratitude. That often helps me feel less stressed, quite honestly. So you've got a good practice going there. Would you say that Headspace helps with stress? Okay, I'm not sure. Headspace is an app. So I'm not sure if you're actually talking about like Headspace, the app that like has different sorts of like meditations and calming things. I've used Calm, the app, so I know that one much better. I guess I would honestly just flip that question on you. Like, if you are talking about the app, if you have tried it, like, what has been your experience? And use your gut and be honest with yourself. Like, has it helped you or has it not? I know that, like, in using Calm, I think it has helped me I've used it irregularly. I guess that's the trouble I see with apps is like, at least for me, I have trouble making them a part of my like rituals and practice, which is again why I like mindfulness so much, because you sort of root a mindfulness practice, like taking a breath or examining a tree, like you root it into your day-to-day life. Whereas when I have to sort of take time out to go use my app for meditation, it's easier for me to like forget about that practice. So let me just recap that so it makes sense. Like an app or any other tool, like those are great. And I would just ask you this question: is it helping you? And if it is, great. If it's not, totally ditch it. But I like a practice of mindfulness where I sort of say, okay, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths before I do like any activity. Or a mindfulness practice that I really like is that I have this tree outside of my window, and sometimes I just really like to pause and look at the tree. Now I know that like probably makes me sound really corny, but it's really easy to do it. It's always there. I just have to look up and I'm reminded, oh, why don't I examine those leaves and just sort of like stop and think about nature for a second. So kind of twofold answering that question. But if you also mean Headspace in terms of like, does it help to get distance from people and things and class and school and like actually have space for your head? Absolutely, yes. I think that really helps. So how do you create that? Like, make it really dark in your room, listen to music that you like, shut your door. If you don't have a room that you can go into by yourself, like just putting music on might help. If you can get outside somewhere, if that's like in your world, if you can just like go to your backyard or go on a trail or something, you can get some like space for your head there. And even if it's like during school, can you just like step outside or step out of a classroom, like physically getting space for your head? I don't know what this question was intended, but there, I've addressed both of them. Oh my gosh, any tips on how to manage imposter syndrome during the college process? Okay, so let me read that again. Any tips on how to manage imposter syndrome during the college process? Oh, that's a massive question. That's a great question. Imposter syndrome is a little killer, isn't it? Just a killer of joy. Okay, so yes, I have a tip on this. First off, no, like I struggle with imposter syndrome. You are not alone. What do I recommend? So again, like imposter syndrome, if we use kind of the scaffolding of tonight's presentation, imposter syndrome is a default. It's a narrative that you have internalized that says, I don't belong here. I'm not good enough. And that is just a narrative. It is not inherently true. It's just a truth that you've come to believe. So I think therein lies one way to kind of help it, is that when you feel it creeping up on you, if you can just pause and examine it and say, okay, that's not inherently true. Then that maybe you aren't able to sort of reject that default just yet. It might take time, but I think the more that you recognize that it's happening and then just sort of start to tell your brain, oh, hey, brain, you're feeling like an imposter. That's not true. Then like ritually telling yourself that will help you actually start to believe, that you do belong. I think in the college process, it's like that you are worthy of applying, or you do have a chance, or it's worth your time. So that's really my sort of like key thought, is just know that imposter syndrome is not a truth. And then like tell yourself that it's untrue, that you are worthy, you do belong. And you'll sort of start to chip away at that old narrative. Next question. Every time I get stressed, I resort to escaping through YouTube, Netflix. Are there rituals that I could use to stop this habit? Holy smokes. I've watched my fair share of bad television and binged it because I'm like an escape artist when I feel stress. Um, yeah. Okay. Are there rituals that you could use to stop this habit? Yes, there are. Um, Let me present to you, though, like a way of thinking about this, because I think sort of like all tips and tricks sort of have to boil down to something like meaningful underneath. So, one, and I'll just kind of narrate for you kind of how this plays out in my life. First off, sometimes escaping isn't bad. Sometimes watching a totally crap show on Netflix, like you need it. It's not bad if that's a part of your self-care practice. Maybe you're great at running and meditating and you watch a crap show on Netflix. Um, so again, that's being sort of done with intentionality. If I'm intentionally saying I need to turn off my brain, I need to zone out, I need to just sort of like feel endorphins and like get to my pleasure zone really quickly, and I'm intentional about like why I'm doing that and why I'm going to Netflix, then by all means escape in that way. If you're arriving there, which is how I often do, from this place of like, I'm so worn out, like I just can't handle it anymore. I'm avoiding my responsibilities. I'm avoiding my stress, which when you use the language resort to, I get it. That's where you are. Then that's where you have to examine that and say, okay, for starters, if you just know that that's what's happening, that's a good step. If you're not just like mechanically going to YouTube or Netflix, like bravo to you, you have recognized your kind of default mode. And then once you recognize that, now you can start to kind of change it. So there are like, okay, one thing you can try, and this is really like a ritual that can help you adapt, is that if you're kind of like seeking that pleasure, if you need to escape, like, okay, so what I have done is when I know that I'm like resorting to Netflix in a like I'm shutting down and escaping mode, I like create an alternative. So for me, that was like drinking a cup of mint tea. And so every time I felt myself like going to that escape place, I switched it and I drank a cup of mint tea instead. Now, look, it doesn't work perfectly. Sometimes I ended up drinking that mint tea while I watched Netflix, but I was able to start kind of replacing that one habit with another. So let me recap, because again, I like keep throwing like heaps of stuff at you guys and gals. First off, like bravo on recognizing your default. That's the first step, is to say, I have awareness that this is happening. Now I can choose to change it. Secondly, it's not always bad to escape if you're going intentionally. Because you know that's what you need and you're seeking that pleasure, it's not an inherently bad thing to do. If you are resorting because you're avoiding responsibilities or avoiding work or procrastinating, then try creating some kind of like replacement tactic. So drink a cup of tea, drink a cup of water, walk around the block, and see if you can kind of like push it off or distract yourself. And you may not be able to. You may very well take that walk around the block and then sit down and watch Netflix. And you might do that a couple of times before you like shift out of the habit. I think also this is not written here, but like it's the binging of Netflix, for me anyway, that becomes an issue. It's like watching one show on Netflix isn't like, that's not terrible. But when I like let the day get away from me, so if that is what's happening to you, you can, like, again, the kind of tea thing is helpful because you can, like, you stop watching when you finish your tea. In fact, that was sort of like kind of a bonus that helps me. I still sometimes, like, none of us are perfect. I know that we're kind of getting to the end of time, so I'm going to push ahead. And maybe somebody from Fiveable, just stop me if I'm going over. Hi, hello. Do you have any advice for rising sophomores in the application process for high school in general? Wow, bravo for being here. Rising sophomores. So I think sophomore year is this interesting time because you're not new anymore, but you're also sort of like not old and you're not a leader. Or like you're not a sort of named leader by the school. But that's where I would sort of inject the question of, I think you can start to kind of establish yourself sophomore year as a leader, and you should sort of go out for things or put yourself out there, or really like start taking ownership of the experience. That's sort of like general high school advice. Is essentially what I'm saying is like, don't think of yourself as being young, as being like, don't let that like, oh, I'm only a sophomore, like not prevent you from kind of putting yourself out there. And then in terms of the application process, what would I recommend? It can be fun to tour campuses. Like if you have the ability to do that, it can be fun to do it sophomore year because maybe it doesn't feel like as high stakes and high pressure. I also would just recommend journaling. And I have 2 reasons for that. One is that you develop a writing skill. And so that's going to be important when it comes to writing your essays. And then you also are kind of collecting your stories. And it may turn out that you can go back through that journal and kind of see patterns in your life, or like see things that you might like to write about. Or even get clues about like where it's ultimately going to be sort of right and good for you to go to school. So twofold: journal, and then like don't listen to that voice in your head or that voice that other people have that says like you're just a sophomore. Like go ahead and step up. Go ahead and take ownership, or ask for things, or go out for like a position or a club or something that you want to go out for. That's my thought. Okay, no more questions from the audience. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Really delighted to meet you. And I'll just end by putting our information on the screen. If you'd like to be in touch, you can find us at mindfulapplicant.com. We would love to have you as a part of our Brain Alive essay writing course, and just feel free to get in touch for any other reason. We are here to help. Thanks again. Have a good one.